Welcome to Haunt Weekly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Crystal.
And this is Haunt Weekly, a weekly podcast for haunted attraction, haunted entertainment community. Whether an actor, owner, or just plain aficionado, we aim to be a podcast for you. And you join us once again as we record live. And if you joining us live, you know it's live because that's a lot of shit up to get here, basically. But we're going now. We're rolling.
Yeah.
And we are joined this week. You know, the tradition we talk about on this podcast is we bring on people smarter than us, easy to find. But this week we have someone way, 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 way smarter than us in the form of Brooke Englehart, who's going to be talking mostly with you. I'm going to be hitting her on the podcast for a little bit.
That's why we switched places.
That's why we switched places. That way she is center and I'm kind of taking the chill pill seat, and that's fine. But we're going to be talking about ways to make haunted attractions a safer place for actors and other employees. I'm actually really interested in this. This has been a topic we have touched on and glanced on a lot. We touched on it with Japes, I know.
Right.
We've talked about it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're going to dive in, and I am so excited. So we've got about an hour of this coming up, and I hope everyone's excited as I am. So, Crystal and Brooke, take it away. Educate me.
Hello.
Hello, Brooke. So,
first, let's mention you are with SvenPuss Productions, right?
Yes.
And I also follow your Evoke tattoos. You do beautiful artwork there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
an amazing artist all around, I think everyone would conclude.
Yes. But is there anything else that you'd like to tell us right now? And also, we've had her on before, so if she sounds familiar, she was on episode 78 as one of our Women in Haunting here. So, Brooke, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me on. What? Sorry, but I missed that. What's that?
Always the easiest question. Tell me about yourself.
Oh, yeah. That's the hardest question. But yeah, I mean, like I know you guys, and but yeah, I'm a Chicago-based haunter. I am involved in SvenPuss Productions. We're a traveling haunted house acting troupe that's been active since 2006, and there's 4 of us in that group, and then we also are vendors at conventions selling our costumes and accessories. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, simple.
Yeah, so simple. All you do is everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you were also on a Code Yellow episode recently. We'll have a link to that
in the show notes.
The show notes. But there were some things on there that you talked about how balancing work life and haunting and making it not so consuming that I thought was brilliant. So if you haven't listened to that episode, you should definitely go listen to that. So why you are here is that we are both in a Facebook group called Women Who Haunt.
You two, not me.
Yes.
It'd be a little awkward for me to be
That's
in
why
it.
it's both and not you.
Who's where?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, but you posted a question to the group about that brought up some problems within the industry. Do you want to go through the whole question? Do you want to synopsis it somehow?
Synopsize?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're comfortable with it, I think it's fair to read the post. I mean, I know that the group definitely, aims to keep things private. So, I know as we go forward talking, we won't mention, people in the group and, people's opinions, but I think, just sharing the initial statement is fair. Would you like me to read it, or would you like to read it?
Let's hear it in your own voice.
Okay, cool. Oh, you get to hear it in my tone. Ooh.
Your beautiful voice.
Okay, so, the post read as this. I had just a bit of a caveat in there about, I know that this is kind of a weird time. This is, obviously during the COVID issues. And then we've had, obviously multiple things going on with protests and everything on top of that. So, it's kind of a heavy topic, but I introduced it like this. I said, beyond talking about the hiccups that femme-identifying haunters experience, how can we work together to make this community, industry, safer and more informed for all marginalized haunters? What I'm getting at is how can we self-regulate in the real world and at our haunted attractions and conventions when someone has an experience that is less than professional? Can we put together a guide or network for haunters to discuss and teach one another how to handle things like sexual harassment and more? Things like being prepared to react, empowering people to speak up or report it, and even practicing responses for in the moment could be a way for us as a community to start addressing this stuff in real time. Personally, I can think of too many uncomfortable situations I have been in both at haunted attractions and conventions that I wish I had been more prepared to handle, especially when I was a minor and it seems that it was accepted behavior within the industry. Aside from things like therapy, self-defense, or workplace harassment training, do y'all have input or suggestions for how we can work together to help change this and allow people to better deal with these situations?
And I thought that was a brilliant question. You always bring a lot of very good intel into the group and into other places because, the questions that you have and the things that you think about are really in-depth, and I appreciate that so much. So it got me thinking about it, and I'm like, well, one of the things you mentioned was, self-defense training, and somewhere in the page there was a mention of how HR would handle it in a normal situation. And I was like, duh, I've worked in HR, but I've never seen it in a haunt, so I thought that was interesting. So let's talk about some of the ideas that we could have for making the industry safer for everyone.
Yes. Yeah, so, ultimately, like full disclaimer, with talking with both of you about this and, with your listeners, I'm by no means an expert. I'm by no means qualified to I just want to ask the right questions. And I think that that's what's important for, all of us in this community to do is to keep asking questions and keep the conversation open. Time and time again, what I notice is issues come up surrounding these topics. Basically people in the haunted attraction industry feeling, as I said, marginalized for so many different reasons. And we need to start paying attention to it, not just let it keep escalating and then forgetting about it. I'd rather keep kind of like a steady wavelength going. So yeah, on that, I think going straight into talking about ideas that we could maybe, sorry, loud car going by. Things that we could, probably deal with in real time. Like first, we could talk about like just reporting, the topic of how do we report when something happens in the industry and at what level, do people feel comfortable, if they have to take it, we're talking about the pre-stages, like before we're taking stuff to like, filing lawsuits, litigation, all that. Like we're just talking about internal community stuff. But yeah, I think talking about it is the first thing because we know that this industry is losing plenty of people, valuable people, because they feel ostracized if they speak up. And I think that's,
right.
That's a priority.
Yeah, there definitely have been stories since I've been in the haunt industry about bullying. And it's unfortunate that that's part of the culture that exists. And it'd be really nice if we could change that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, just, even that you two are willing to bring up this topic on a bigger platform, speaks volumes to how much, it is necessary.
Right.
I think that, okay. I mean, I can just like go into tons of different things, just like,
Right.
like reporting in the industry, like,
Right.
we've talked about, just like how many things, just between like having someone that you can report things to anonymously, having, like advice lines where, like, someone's essentially kind of like the spokesperson for advice and kind of can just listen to people privately, and then we could, really open up and talk about the issues of like call out culture versus like calling in culture, and, how is that relevant in our industry? That all falls under reporting, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
And every haunt is different. There's not a standard set of instructions that, for how to report things or how to deal with difficult situations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that's something that, just on that note, yeah, it's like we have a spectrum of people in this industry and community, and that ranges from just on the business side, that's volunteer charity shows, all the way through like amusement parks, and that's such a vast range of like, besides locations, just the business structure, and that in my opinion that requires a lot more understanding from all haunters on things like, are you an employee? Are you a volunteer? What are your rights? Are you an independent contractor? What do those things mean? That's kind of what was brought up on, with the podcast discussion on A Code Yellow. Everybody kind of needs to be on the same page so we know the rules. Otherwise, we are just going to spin in circles.
Right. And I think that you have an interesting perspective on that because you are a traveling actor, as you said, or performer. So I think that you've probably seen more haunts than most and how they operate. Is there anything that standard that you've seen in the Chicago area?
I mean, that's tricky. Admittedly, I have been, even though I'm based out of the Chicago area, I have not worked at Chicago haunted houses since about 2016. 2016.
Okay.
So it's been a little bit. So, I mean, obviously I have worked at, a handful of haunted attractions here since 2006. But, some of those aren't active anymore. But I can say this, that, I hear, and obviously hearsay is hearsay, but I hear a lot of problems that haunters have based around this topic, and especially in Chicago. I mean, it's where I'm located out of, but there's so many issues that are related to this topic that are kind of just swept under the rug for I'm sure a plethora of reasons. But it's a problem, and I think it hits a lot of people differently, whether they're on, the side of like, we'll just say, the victims that aren't being taken seriously, or people that are being accused of being abusers that, maybe aren't taking it seriously. And I think that's the first step, is people taking it serious.
Right. Yeah, you definitely have to believe the people who are telling you there's a problem.
Right.
Whether that's a performer, an employee, a customer, because customers play a role in this. And
completely, yeah.
You have to believe them.
That you have to believe them when they say there is a problem, and you have to believe it is a problem. It's two separate beliefs there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things that we put in the notes is self-regulation, and I think a guide that could be distributed, across the haunt industry is something that could work really well if people were open to actually following it. And this is something that, I worked in the nuclear industry for a minute or 8 years, something like that. And that's one of the things I found interesting. Before the government got involved, whenever 3 Mile Island happened, I'm losing my words. It's not good. They started setting out all of the regulations for each of the things, and they took it on themselves as an industry. And then, when it escalated, then they already had a playbook in place.
Yeah.
So I think something like that could benefit the industry as a whole.
Oh, completely. And I think that's what, kind of like what, like the question I posed on the, on the Facebook group spot to that. I think self-regulation and preparing for things is better than, kind of like looking back and saying, oh, we could have avoided that if we would have taken a minute to plan and, consider safety and all these other things that are part of this.
Yeah.
It's always better to have a policy that you don't use than have a policy you need but don't have.
Boom. Yep. Yeah, this is definitely not one of those situations that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like that doesn't that does not apply here.
Yeah. So, what kind of things would you put in such a policy?
Excuse me. Well, I mean, definitely.
Or would you like to see?
I mean, obviously, there's a level of like professionalism that has to be legally upheld. And whether laws are fair or just, is a separate thing. But I think most haunts could start there by just like, what is legal and not legal. Like let's get really basic with it. It's not legal to date or have relationships with minors if you are not a minor. Like that's like bare bones self-regulation. Unfortunately, we have to address that in the haunted attraction industry, and yeah, like that. And obviously there's a lot of different levels to that, but I think we can just agree that it's like that's just a legal thing. That's a responsibility for each individual to uphold. And obviously the businesses running, these haunted attractions should think that that's fair. That shouldn't,
yeah,
that's in their interest.
I mean, can you please do the bare minimum?
Yeah. Yeah. Can we start there?
Yeah, because I know there are rumors from people who work at a haunt here about their hiring practice involving young women that are under legal age and problems that they've had. And, one of the actors that that we've had here for several years went to work there. And I think maybe she turned 18 this year.
Yeah.
But, so I checked up with her mom, every week, how's it going? Any problems?
Yeah.
Because if they've changed their policies since the issues that I had heard about years before, had changed, then I didn't want to call them out on it. But I also wanted to make sure that, this person that I mentored was safe.
Yeah, looking out, because unfortunately we know that this people need to be looked out for.
Right.
In this, I mean, it's every industry. It's all forms of entertainment, comedy, acting, like it's everywhere. But, we are a niche industry that has kind of some built-in structure flaws, that can get abused. So.
Well, and it's especially difficult for people who are new.
Yes.
Because when you're new at anything, you're starting at the bottom. It doesn't matter anything. You're starting at the bottom, and you feel you're not in a position of power. You may not feel like you have a place to speak out and to talk, and that's a real problem. We have to, those people who are just starting out, we have to really watch out for, basically, because they're the ones that are most vulnerable for anything.
Right.
Completely.
And the person I was talking about, this was actually her first paying job.
Yeah, ever. Full stop. First paying gig ever.
Yeah.
So starting at the very, very bottom of everything and super vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I was just going to say, two things with that are, just two totally different tangents of, more questions. It's like, first of all, it's kind of a common accepted thing that, the haunted attraction industry, it typically is very attractive to people who feel marginalized. Usually it's like, a lot of like theater kids. It's a lot of like, spooky weirdos. A lot of very introverted people are drawn to haunted house acting. So already we're talking about people who, who are looking for a place to fit in at. And that's also unfortunately grounds to easily be manipulated and, maybe had some ideals held over your head like bait, like a carrot on a stick. And
Right.
that's another recipe for like not being professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that there definitely does need to be something and some way of central reporting, even if it's just between actors themselves, like building a better network,
Yeah.
between everybody. Um, do you know of anything like that that kind of exists right now?
That's complicated, because there's do I know of one in the real world, like that exists that people can physically, reach out to? No, I can't say I do. Online, yeah, I think there's like small communities, budding where people feel, safer to reach out and share experiences, and whether those are like social circles, whether those are, like Facebook groups, etc. I think it's happening online, and that's where I pose the question: how can we really make this something like in the real world that can happen here and now? Because I think that is important for topics like this.
Right. And even if it starts, on the part of the performers themselves, taking the initiative to get the word out, and having a place that's advertised. But I mean, then again, I don't know how you would get that advertisement to go global, because haunts are reaching out of the U.S. right now. It's
Right.
not going to be just a U.S. problem.
Yeah, something that, like SvenPuss that we've been putting together is like, we like the idea of information being accessible and not like not like so like limited, you know? So like we put together this like hagzine, we call it, but it's a haunt acting guide. And it's just like a cheap little zine that people can pick up for, I think it's like $5. Um, with COVID and stuff, we didn't get to we only got to mail them out. We never got to actually have them out in person. But, that's something that we've considered, like, why can't, a group of, haunters get together and put together information for people and make it downloadable, or just give out copies, where it's, you can, you disperse it organically instead of it being this thing, like, instead of it being like, oh, share this at a seminar that, people had to pay money to go to. It's like, no, we need information that comes from the bottom up, and is informative for people, even if they're not spending money to learn it.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a good point. And obviously it could be taken to other places too, but that people do pay money to go to conventions and stuff. But I think that starting it on the lower level is a really good idea on how to get it spread. That's a lot of haunts get their started through word of mouth and, going cheaper ways to spread information.
Yeah.
It makes it accessible.
Accessible. That's the word. It's accessible so that, and especially for all age groups, it doesn't, especially internet. That's the nice thing with the internet is we can connect regardless of age and distance. So it's perfect for it.
Yeah. And I, and when we were thinking about this, or when I was thinking about this and typing out questions, I was talking about a Facebook group. But really, the younger generations are like, oh, you're on Facebook, you're old.
It's
Oh,
true.
it's on TikTok. They're on TikTok and Bing Bong and
but it changes all the time. So I'm wondering if maybe, just a website that's put out to all of the social media as it changes would be a better, place to have this list.
Yeah.
These are good haunts, these are bad haunts, these are, and, that's one of the things industry workers can do now is start leaving reviews,
Right.
the good and the bad, because you don't want to punish the whole industry. You want to lift up those people who are really doing good things, but you definitely want to call out the people who were not.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, calling out, you hear people talk about call out culture a lot. I feel like that's such a complex thing that is, it's so necessary, unfortunately, for people to have to do it. But, I definitely understand the hangups that, sometimes in calling out, if there's, we'll just be really blanket statement here, focusing on predatory behavior, in the haunted attraction industry. And I don't mean business predatory, though that exists, but, sexual predator, inappropriate sexual harassment, sexual language, or, sexual contact. Predatory behavior is something that, we are seeing get called out. We're a bit late on it. I think a lot of haunters raise their eyebrows at Me Too, kind of looking around who's gonna say it, and it took a while. It took quite a while because of the repercussions of calling people out. And there's, obviously the social media stigma of the backlash of people telling you that you are, wrong, incorrect, that, they've never had that experience with the person that's being accused, so therefore you're wrong. And it's hard, I do definitely like to leave things to the justice system. And it's if someone sexually harassed you, you have to take it and go further with it to get justice. And then that means that what you post online can hurt your case. And that's where call out culture can get really dangerous, where it's actually maybe if someone is a victim in a situation like that and they have a mass of people also calling out this person, if it's not done just right, that can hurt their case. And that, that then there's counter cases of things harassment, defamation of character. There's so many different things that just snowball on top of each other, where it is important to keep it offline and keep it, keep everything on the record, keep everything, between, your attorneys, and that's it. So
Right.
I don't know. I'm always I'm very for self-regulation, but I understand that there's caveats to that. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Well, maybe to protect people, the resource should be something more of a, haunt. Have you had an inappropriate experience here? Yes or no. Then you don't have to give your name or anything. And then if multiple people, are checking yes, then a letter gets sent to the haunt saying, hey, there's this resource out here, and we've been getting a lot of reports that this is a problem at your haunt.
I think that's actually very interesting, and I like that because it's a little bit more private for all parties involved. It's not stating what the situation is, but it's stating that there's there's a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just, I like that because that's just a step back, and that still fits into self-regulation without so much exposure. Not that exposure is always bad, but
right.
But sometimes also if it's in traumatic situations, that kind of opening up about those topics are really raw for for people. So that's also, I think, courteous to that kind of trauma.
Right. And if you put something out there on Facebook or out there for the world, sometimes the world will re-victimize the victim by harassing them. It's not just harassment of or liable claims against the haunt. It's that you can feel a lot of that come back to them, and we don't want that.
Exactly.
We want to help people. Yeah. Okay. So there was, in your question, you mentioned things like, or your original statement, self-defense and HR practices for reporting. Was there anything there Have you ever had any of that in relation to a haunted house?
Yeah. I mean, I have seen really awesome management teams handle situations super appropriately, and that's always like, it blows my mind to see it. And I will say that usually, and this is just, like some isolated experiences. This isn't meant to make a statement about people, but I notice that the people that take this stuff seriously and are able to act together in real time are actually younger people, and that's what always impresses me, how quickly younger people are able to identify something, younger than me, and like able to like react and say, okay, we have to isolate this situation. These are the rules. All parties knew the rules. This was a haunted attraction that was very structured, very organized, employee handbooks to the T, so everybody came in knowing what to expect, and that, hey, if someone's accused of, misconduct, especially in the haunted house, like we're talking about the employees, not a patron.
Right.
They know it's like, it's zero tolerance. So, okay, gotta go, and it was smooth and it was professional. I can't say that, I've seen that consistently in a bunch of different situations. That's tricky when you talk about things like, different forms of, bigotry, like we're talking about like racism, things like, people, people's sexual identity, things like that. I can't say I've seen have as much support as saying, hey, you can't hit on women or, young women, minors,
right,
at this show, like that's definitely got a lot more support. So I also kind of think, hey, if we can make waves of progress in that realm, can we apply that to, other areas? Like I said, like, things related to race, things related to like sexual identity or sexuality, there's a lot of haunted attractions who are doing an awesome job. And that, there are people who are at shows that are like amazing, and inclusive and not, they don't have these problems. And it's like, that'd be cool to hear, from them what they're experiencing and how they're applying it. Because I haven't seen a lot of that on the, like, I guess you'd say more like corporate level, like the higher, like, higher structure type show. And I think that's the place it needs to come from.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Because the leaders in the industry are going to set the tone for everybody else.
Yeah,
and I think you mentioned something that I think was really important, which was you said the youth, are handling this better than the elders, we'll say. But we're very much an elder-driven industry in many ways.
Yeah.
You think of the big names in the haunted industry, they've all been in it for 35, 40 years, for 10 lifetimes. And,
right.
And I think that is potentially one of the things we have to look at. You mentioned in our episode about things the haunted industry needs to grow. One thing was be innovation-led, be youth-led. I mean, we're all old bastards compared to this conversation. We're all old bastards compared to maybe what we need.
Yeah. Well, and also we're not the, younger and younger people in theory go to haunted houses. So, are we also maybe in not being connected with our younger employees? Maybe we're not connecting with our younger patrons.
Yeah. I agree with all that completely. I think that's hurting us across the board because think about who goes to a haunted house. Mm-hmm. It's not old people.
Right.
Not typically. We cater to the 18 to 35, usually white male, but more varied along those lines demographic.
Yeah, I think that should be changing too.
That's changing, but the youth element is changing less.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to target the youth and be a youth industry, then we need to be youth-led.
Yeah, and they, there are certain things that, there are certain things that I've just seen younger, haunters do that, really impresses me, like their ability to work together in groups, to organize, to, to also point out issues that they can think are outdated and useless. But the counter thing that I've noticed is that a lot of them don't stick around this industry. They bounce. They say, ugh, gross, and they leave. And so we're losing that access to, fresh minds, variety, diversity. Like we're losing it because we're not appealing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not doing our piece to make it a welcoming and inclusive environment for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Great.
And so that brings to the next point.
Yeah.
Actually, what can owners do to improve?
So no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice setup.
A little setup there, you see?
Smooth.
Slide. But yes, what can owners do to improve? Good question.
So I think there's a lot, and I think and this applies to a lot of people, like owners of everything, owners of businesses, owners of haunted attractions, vendors, everything. I think the first thing that we forget a lot is like listening, and it's like just listening, and that takes a lot of energy. That takes a lot of like concentration and like, being present. And that's something that you can't always just pass off to someone else to manage that for you, but like you have to listen. You have to, not saying you have to agree by any means, you don't have to agree with people, but like listen to their input, listen to their opinions, and like maybe understand like, and I don't mean just listening to what they say, but like hear what they're saying. Right. If you get a group of, and I'm just being general here, if you get a group of like femme identifying haunters coming together and saying we have a problem with sexual harassment, sexual conduct, and like less than professional behavior, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that there would be a lot of haunt owners who wouldn't listen. And I mean, male and female haunters that wouldn't listen. And it's not just guys that don't listen. There's a lot of like internalized oh, they spoke up. Ooh, well, if everyone doesn't agree with them, I'm safer because I have the privilege of being accepted by these people because I worked hard to be an owner in a man's world. It kind of leads into that stuff. Right. Or they just don't simply, they're so accustomed to that type of behavior and that they benefit from it somehow, so they're not going to call it out. But I think listening is important.
Yeah, listening, and that goes back to that believing. And I want to point out that believing also goes to male identifying performers and employees.
Yes.
Because they aren't believed whenever they speak up.
Yeah.
It's just a statistic. So remember, listen to everybody and believe everybody. At least look into it. It's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point because obviously when talking about, like sexual misconduct, we are more used to, like, well, I'm just being general here, but, like women sticking up for each other.
Right.
And like saying something, and I think unfortunately we have these kind of like stoic ideas that like not everyone can complain. Not everyone can say like, hey, I was a victim. We set up, people in our societies or groups, especially, like men, to be stoic and like never complain and never be a victim because that's a weakness. And it's like, oh, that's so like self-destructive, and just we're not making it better by not listening.
Right. And I think it's important to also have a clear path to reporting in each of the haunts to the owners for them and for it to be laid out, okay, when you report, what happens? What can you expect to happen? Yes. And I think it should also be encouraged, to speak up for each other. Make you see something that's happening but the person doesn't report it. You can still report that.
That's something that, I think that goes right back into self-regulating, and I agree. I notice that, like, myself, personally speaking, if I see someone around me getting mistreated, I am very comfortable sticking up for them. Like, I'm like, no, don't talk to my friend that way, but when it's me, I take a step back and I do, like, shut down.
Yeah, it's often easier to talk about what happened to someone else than happened to you.
Yes. Completely.
I think it's a weird quirk in psychology. I don't ask me to explain it, but I've noticed that across a lot of things.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're spot on that we sometimes we question maybe ourselves and our experiences, and we don't, maybe even though because I think we look at it with feelings, we're like, oh, I feel this way, and this, like, we feel like when we have, like uncomfortable situations, that for some reason the logic is removed out of it sometimes. But like if you see it happening to someone else, it's a little bit easier to be, not that we're foolproof and always clean cut, but it's like when a situation looks inappropriate, most people can look at it and say like, whoa, that's inappropriate, that, I either need to get involved and split it up, or I need to tell someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know, like, personally, like, if you attack me or insult me or do something to me, it's whatever. I live with a bunch of mental disorder issues. You can't hurt me worse than I hurt myself. If you attack someone I love or someone I know, I'm going to be on your stuff fast. You won't even know what hit you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that culture of sticking up for each other is going to be crucial moving forward, because people aren't comfortable speaking out for themselves.
Yeah.
That's very true.
And, technology can help that a lot. Like, obviously,
Exactly.
younger and younger people obviously being comfortable having their, phone on record like that, when something gets weird. Haunted houses that have cameras in that help kind of be more objective, and then we can avoid like the, they said this, they said that. It's not just one person saying something against another. It's, it can be a little bit more straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've got about 10 to 12 minutes left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we started a little bit late. So what are some ways that owners can make characters more inclusive?
I mean,
you were like pioneering in this. I've heard the tales of when you and your sister walked out as twins at the conference and just blew the room away.
So something that, we kind of hold close to our hearts in SvenPuss, and, and we've offered to talk about it before, but, I understand that it's pretty uncomfortable topics for a lot of people. But the reason we look the way we do, and like our identity, is strictly formed about, like, we have formed our visual identity on rebelling against being, recognizable objects, because, either, we all started haunting, and it was, 3 gals, and we worked with a couple guys, and all of us were sick of being groped, touched inappropriately, and, this is by patrons, this is by people that we worked with, this is, and we were minors, and we were so accustomed to that we realized that the only way we felt we could express that and fight it was to look absolutely disgusting and make people uncomfortable back. And, that's not necessarily speaking to inclusion, but it is speaking to, like, empowerment, and maybe
Right.
That's something that we can, bring to audition interview practices, is like, empowering people to become something that feels right to them. And, and then that can maybe, I think we have, depending on where you live and like, what part of the country it is and stuff, you're going to get a variety of people. And how can you empower them and make them part of your group?
Right.
I think it comes a lot from the performing, but also it comes from the management end, which is, that's still kind of based on everything we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of experience with pro haunts. Both the ones that I worked in before we started our own, partly because of these issues.
Yeah.
The first one put me in a victim role. That was where they thought I needed to be. And the second one put me in a mom role. Because, and I was early 20s. I wasn't a mom. But I was a girl, and that's, the spot, it was aggravating. Because, so at the second one, I want to tell a story real quick, and then we'll go on.
Go ahead.
The bathroom guy. So there's a bathroom scene. The bathroom guy was out one weekend and completely, didn't call in nothing. So I said, hey, I can take that role. So I did, and I worked it in a completely different way. Everybody screamed. It was more effective. Bathroom guy comes back the next day. He gets in, and they teach him how to do what I was doing. And I get stuck back being a mom.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Classic. Laugh.
Yeah, it's those little, I guess they would be called microaggressions or just sexist outright.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and one of the issues that you're talking about, I think that both of us is the idea of giving actors enough freedom to express themselves. Because when you say you are this, whatever this is, it doesn't even matter. If it's a guy role, girl role, whatever. If you are this, you're not comfortable in that role. You don't feel empowered in it. And you're limited in how you can respond when things happen. Because that's taking away power. And a lot of owners, I don't think, really consider all the implications of defining someone's role so strictly.
Right.
Yeah, completely. Well, and obviously, you both nailed it with like performance end, that it's like that's so important. And then there's also, in the like management roles, in the show, and I'm more familiar obviously with the performance end. And when I say like management, I mean management regarding performance, not so much like, like sales, marketing, like, the more like technical end of operating a show. But like on the performance end, I've definitely seen plenty of, and I would just say my lens obviously focuses a lot on female haunters, or, femme-identifying haunters. And I've seen plenty of women that were more than qualified for promotions and roles, and they were not given them due to the fact that they did not physically look intimidating. So it didn't seem to the people hiring, it didn't seem advantageous to put them in a role of authority because they didn't think anyone would take them seriously in the event of having to, say, throw someone out of the haunted house, or, reporting something to the security staff, that even just the hiring, the people making those choices, at least whether they were biased or not, I can't comment on, but that they knew that the public's bias was a problem, and that person would automatically have a harder time doing their job, so they were disqualified from something that they were, in my opinion, more than qualified for, and could have just been addressed with better training.
Yeah. That's so frustrating. I mean, yeah, and it's the trip to Chicago actually really opened my eyes to what haunting could be.
That's
because
cool.
there was a lot. Yes, there was a lot of diversity in the cast and in the types of roles that were available compared to our local region. Our local region, there are no male victims, and and if you are a person of color, you are probably put in a voodoo scene in this area, and there's not a lot of choice, which is a shame. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. You mentioned in your original post conventions. How can that be handled better and managed better? Because this is something that has actually come up a lot recently at places where people cosplay.
Yep.
Yeah. It obviously is an issue for the haunted attraction industry, but it's been more vocal in like Comic Cons and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, of course, haunting would be parallel to those communities too. Okay, I guess there's two notes on that. Even just like the most recent Midwest Haunters Convention, being in Chicago for the first time, there was some pretty big, misconduct being called out. Actually, I think almost after every MHC, there's a lot of, discussion on forums, I guess they're not forums, groups, Facebook groups, Haunters Hangout. And unfortunately, a lot of them get shut down because Haunters Hangout, it's not meant to be, it's not designed or moderated to be a critical group that promotes conversation. And so those things get taken down. So, unfortunately, they get taken down and they get kind of erased and not talked about. That's where I think that maybe internet's shouldn't be the only place to have those discussions. I think that, that's where there needs to, I don't know, if I'm just being really big and boastful, because I know we're, running short on time too, I think HAA should finally come together and have, a member on their board that addresses it with, complete discretion, and anonymity, and make that a smooth transition between, the different convention operators, whether it's HauntCon, Transworld, whatever, West Coast, whatever Haunters convention. I think there needs to be an organization that's already in existence that oversees that and just facilitates, whether it's like someone to talk to, just having resources, even, I don't know, I don't know how long it would last. I think it might happen once and then it'd die out, but I think there should just be basic training for all people, like prepared conversations to have. And that goes two ways. That's like, hey, if someone said something inappropriate to you, what are some professional ways that we can express to each other, I'm not comfortable with that, you are crossing a line? And then vice versa, if someone says to you like, hey, you're crossing a line with me, please stop. Maybe some training on how to say, my intention was this, duly noted, I'll back off, or like, oh, I really didn't mean it like that,
Right.
Would you like to talk more, or, do you need space? I don't know, but we could figure out ways that are better than like, hey, that's fucked up. I'm going to tell all my friends that's fucked up. They're going to tell you that's fucked up. And then you're going to get defensive and take it personally. And then it becomes my business versus your business. There's, I wish I could have done that. There's plenty of times where I've had interactions that left me feeling really gross afterwards. And, I shut down. That's not that person's fault that I shut down due to my past experiences, but I do regret that in the moment I couldn't have told them or expressed in a better way how uncomfortable it made me, because they probably don't know, and I'm not going to call them out for it because it was probably harmless, or it was just, an age difference where that was acceptable to them and it was not acceptable to me, and maybe there's just a personal shout out that like, hey, if that happened to me and I've been active at haunt conventions since 2006, why couldn't we reach out to younger and younger people and give them those tools to navigate this industry so they don't have the same problems that we've had?
Right. And I think that maybe on the conference side, there's two things that could happen. One is train all of the, help desk staff that gives out the tickets and everything on how to deal with these situations, and let conference goers know, hey, if you experience something that you're uncomfortable with, please come to us, because that puts it out there that the conference isn't going to take it. They're not going to do that.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
Yeah. And another thing is to educate people that when they are being corrected, it's not necessarily a personal attack. It's not saying, hey, you're a horrible person that did something inexcusable. We're educating you that this particular action is potentially harmful.
Right.
And because there needs to be both we need to make the environment less welcoming to people that do that, like you're saying.
Right.
And also, we need to encourage people to be more open to education and learning and growth in this area, because that's something that a lot of people aren't, and it's kind of pissing me off a lot.
Yeah.
Spot on.
And the other thing that I think conferences could do is add it to their review. Whenever you are filling out those reviews of, seminars and things, why not add it to your review page of the conference? Did you have any bad interactions? Did we handle it okay?
Yeah, I think that would be
what could we do differently? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one extra question on the survey.
Exactly.
And since you're already filling out a 20 goddamn question survey every conference I've been to, you could put one in on there.
But, I think that does open up, the more questions of, like, let's say these things were implemented and, but are they going to fall on deaf ears? Is that like a cultural thing in our industry? And then does that just create more resentment and more frustration? Then people feel like they're not being taken seriously. And I'm obviously being really cynical about it, but that's, that is a fear of mine. Like who, like if something happened that was uncomfortable to the level that I didn't quite want to like report it at like a police level and, make a, basically make a statement about it, and I want to address it to that person, in the moment, more directly, maybe a little bit more sincerely, especially if it's someone that you know or that you maybe have a working relationship with or something. It's like, how can you do that without, what is the ultimate goal? What is, like, for me in a lot of situations, it's that I just don't want that behavior to keep happening or happen to others. Yeah. It's not that I want to ruin that person's career or that I think that they are, like, irrescuable. I mean, there are people in our industry, don't get me wrong, who are a lost cause and, just face palm them out of the screen, like, get out of here. But, I'm sure I say things or have done things, or will do things that make someone uncomfortable.
I'm positive I have.
I know I have with a high degree of certainty.
Yeah.
And that's just part of, interacting and learning, and that, how can we promote that without making people afraid to
and some of it is we're an industry of socially awkward motherfuckers. I mean, some of it's just as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So real quick to wrap it up, do actors need to unionize?
So I've had this discussion with, like a small group of people in the haunted attraction industry that I hold to the highest standard. And whether it's unionizing or having like management representation in the form of like a not an attorney, but like just someone representing.
An ombudsman would be the term in other industries, I think.
Yeah.
But,
ombudsman or what they, it's not like that. Okay.
The common thread that I hear, and I hear why, is that is too intimidating for businesses to want to get involved with those people then. So it is, it comes off as very confrontational and not like community-based.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, those people are people that I talk to because I respect them, and I think that they don't run their shows with, like bigotry, biases, all that. So of course to them they'd be like, well, man, that's just gonna really make stuff even more complicated and just, make stuff more challenging. So I understand why they'd feel that way. But I also think that, there's a lot of butt faces in this industry that, that might be the only way to shake them out of their complacency.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Right. Brooke, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all we have in the notes, and that was enlightening. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I know this is like a, not necessarily a fun topic, but I do appreciate you guys,
Oh, if we were obsessed with doing fun topics, we wouldn't be doing Haunt Weekly.
No.
Yeah, but I do. I
Have you listened to this podcast?
I do. I do. I actually like. I feel like regularly I mention your guys' episode about talking about some bad things happening in haunting, and you guys are talking about like real estate, property, all that, and I feel like I'm always like, everybody needs to go listen to that, and it's just getting worse.
No. We appreciate you coming on. A lot of great information here. I know with the live chat we had some issues with the outgoing stream. The recording has been immaculate.
Yeah.
The actual conversation has been immaculate on site. So we have a good recording. If you're listening to this and like, oh, you broke up on this, tomorrow we'll have the actual edited episode up, and it'll be in full, and it's going to be beautiful. It'd be wonderful. It'd be beautiful. It'd be amazing. So just check us out then.
Cool.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Listen, definitely check out more of Brooke's stuff. She's at SvenPuss Productions. Where can they find you? Give us places where people can find you.
Yeah, so the best two places are our website and Instagram. So our website is
you young kids in your Instagrams.
Oh, I love the Instagram.
I do too.
You young kids.
I mean, we have Facebook, but admittedly for us, Facebook is just kind of a placeholder that just redirects you to our website. I love websites. I think that, they're great. We also have a web store on there, so that's just easier. And then Instagram is maybe where you'd see more like candid pictures, not necessarily things that we go on our website, but it's still relevant to SvenPuss Productions.
So those are SvenPuss Productions on Instagram and the web, internet, and broadly, we'll say there. But yes, thank you very much for joining us. And we are Haunt Weekly.
We are.
You can find us at hauntweekly.com. That's our internet website. We're not cool enough to have an Instagram. We're not allowed on Instagram. But we do have a Facebook, Haunt Weekly. We're on Twitter at Haunt Weekly. YouTube is youtube.com/Haunt Weekly. And we're also on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever podcasts are distributed. They have not kicked us out yet, despite their better judgment. But thanks, Brooke. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you all in the chat for your patience. I know this is a technically challenging one. Sometimes the streams like these are. But thank you very much. And we will see you guys next week.